Welcome back to Everything All the Time. I'm Pat O'Brien along with Court McCowan. Want to say your own name?
If I do, would it be plagiarizing it?
If I do, would it be plagiarizing? Oh, you just said that. Joining us now, Court and I were talking the other week after the back-to-back OJ, the fictional one, and then the real, the one that said the real thing. And Jim Newton, who was with the L.A. Times at the time, award-winning L.A. Times reporter and editorialist. And I was there too. So, and Jim and I have two things in common. We've both been into a fight. Have you been into a fight with OJ?
I didn't get into a fight with OJ, but there was a moment where we tussled a little bit when I was in the only interview I ever did with him when he tried to take my tape recorder, and it did get a little heated.
I was at a party in Miami in the VIP section, and OJ somehow got in there, and he saw me, and he had called me a bunch of times, to try to talk to me, and because he and I were friends. And he started screaming at me, and he got really ugly. Ooh. And finally, somebody picked me up from behind Jim and literally dragged me out of this room and took me out in the hallway. I turned around, it was Shaq. He said, I got you out of there.
Yeah.
Wow.
What did you make of the whole return to OJ phenomenon?
Well, it is sort of a weird...
and by the way, hold on a second. By the way, Jim was, in my mind, the thread in the real documentary. I thought you were great in it. So what did you make? What did you make of the whole thing?
I mean, first of all, thank you, and I thought they did a great job. So I was appreciative personally and also generally of their work. I think it's a case that has a lot of threads running through it, a lot of themes that are relevant. I think today, police relations with African Americans, whether the LAPD in those days was capable of a frame up. Class issues, race issues, interracial marriage. I mean, so I guess I'm not completely surprised that people would rediscover it. It did seem sort of odd that both in the fictional version and the non-fictional version debuted so close together. And it certainly has got a lot of people talking about it again in a way that they haven't for years. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
I thought the documentary, I watched both of them. I thought the Crime Story was a little bit over the top with something. I thought David Schwimmer as Kardashian was almost ridiculous, but I thought the one of the most interesting things was how much I discovered. And I was reading
I thought Schwimmer was great as Kardashian.
I thought he was terrible.
How about Travolta?
Travolta was weird.
Okay, go ahead.
Played him as weird. But I thought the interesting thing, the documentary to me was one of the greatest documentaries I've ever seen. And,
yeah, me too.
And I just found it so interesting. The things I discovered, because I followed the trial very closely, and, that O.J.'s dad was gay, I never knew that. I never knew that. And it really painted, I think, a really awesome picture about the rage that this guy really actually had and how he was, he was this great guy on one side, but there was this other side of him that they kind of started uncovering that I don't think anybody really knew that much about.
Yeah, listen, I must say, I didn't think there was anything left for me to learn about this case. I really lived it for over a year. That's all I did, really. And I did not know that Simpson's father was gay. And the other part for me that was really revealing is that post-acquittal life.
Oh, my God.
In Florida, where he just kind of
I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, I just kind of dropped covering it. I did a little bit of coverage of the civil trial, his testimony, and a couple other things. But for the most part, I moved on to other things after the acquittal, and so all of that material was new to me.
Jim Newton's our guest, former LA Times great, and now at UCLA, a professor. And, of course, about ethics in journalism. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm assuming there are ethics in journalism. Well, by the way, when I was doing the LJ trial, I was the guy outside, all dressed up, plagiarizing what you wrote in the newspaper. Just so you know how that works.
Got a long, rich history.
Just how you know. So, did you, having to relive this again, first of all, my son's 29. He didn't know much about it. He knew that OJ and I were friends. And by the way, take your quirkiest friend, let's pretend it's me, and someone called you and said, Pat O'Brien killed his wife last night, at least you would say, no way.
Yeah, right.
You'd say, well, what? Really? What happened? When they called me and told me this, and I was OJ's golf partner, I said, what time? So there was something about him that made you believe it, whether or not he's guilty or not, made you believe it right away, right? Or was that your feeling?
Well, listen, I had no relationship with him prior or since. So the entirety of my knowledge of him really is around the case. So I didn't really have a reaction one way or another. I was back in my little brother's law school graduation, in fact, when I got word of the murders, and then flew straight home. So I didn't really have a reaction as to whether he was capable of it or not, because I just didn't really have. I mean, I knew him as as a football fan,
right,
and as the Hertz guy, but that's really it.
And reliving it for you, I think it was great for millennials because not great, but I mean it was informational for millennials who really shut. My son was just glued to it because he didn't know anything about it. To be honest with you,
Well,
I think it's great for millennials.
Yeah, I thought an interesting thing too is the way they did the timeline in the documentary and how they started it out. And how there were little things in there that you saw, like the fact that she was more than likely having an affair with Marcus Allen, or that that there were little things going on.
Let's not bring in rumors and stuff.
I'm just saying that this isn't stuff. I'm not making this up. This was stuff that was in the documentary. But I mean, just the little things that we we never heard about any of this stuff.
Doesn't mean you kill somebody.
Well, again. I just find, one of the interesting things you said in an interview you did was if you just step back and look at just the blood evidence, if you just look at the blood evidence, it's pretty hard not to say this guy was, and the prosecution decided not to go in that direction.
Yeah, listen, I may think there's a lot of things the prosecution would like to take over in that case. Of course, the defense's answer to the blood evidence, and you can either believe it or not, is that it's so corrupted by LAPD that it's no coincidence that that his blood would be at the scene, that both Ron and Nicole's blood would show up in his car and then at his house. Because if the LAPD is running around, or someone at the LAPD is running around and planting it, that's exactly what you would expect to find. So,
right.
Again, I'm not vouching for that theory necessarily, but that's the way it was answered at the time, and presumably that's how the jury regarded it.
Jim Newton's our guest. He was, in my mind, in our minds, really the star of the Made in America documentary. Now is a UCLA professor. Can I sit in on your class someday?
Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
Okay. Well, I'll speak at it if you want. I'll even waive my speaking fee. Did you, when they called you to ask you to do this, did you say why?
I had some misgivings about it, I must say. This is all very powerful stuff, and as you well know, you agree to an interview. In this case, a 3 or 4 hour interview, one went on for a long time, and they had a lot of detailed questions. The possibility of being misunderstood or being misrepresented,
exactly.
And I didn't really know these folks at all, so I was a little nervous about it. There's a story that I tell that's in the documentary about working with my colleague Andrea Ford.
Sure.
And there was one day of testimony where there was an argument about whether the N-word would be allowed in the proceedings, and it was a really sobering moment for me because Andrea, who was African American, she's since died, but she heard that argument very differently than I did, and I felt like kind of an idiot afterward. But it was really a consciousness-raising moment for me too, where I understood that the two of us could attend the same proceeding, hear the same words, and process them really differently. It's really the thing that has reinforced for me the need for diversity in newsrooms. But I worried when I told that story that cut the wrong way or presented the wrong way, it really could just make me look like a nincompoop. And so they didn't do that, though. So I really feel like this wasn't a matter of people who were doing interviews because they had preconceived notions and they were just going to go far enough to get the quote that validated it. It felt like a genuine exploration of trying to tease out the bigger truths of the case. So I think they did a wonderful job. And yes, I went into it with some uneasiness, but I really think they handled it quite well.
Johnny Cochran once said to me, Pat, in this country, you're guilty until proven broke.
I can hear him say it.
One of the great lines. And I remember the night the gloves didn't fit, I went into some restaurant in the Valley. I was still drinking back then. And Marsha Clark was at the bar.
Oh, boy.
With stacked up scotches.
Oh, cool.
I said, bad day, huh, Marsha? Yeah. Hey, Jim Newton, you teach ethics. Just real quickly, what'd you make of the Melania Trump hullabaloo? In other words, Melania
Well,
Trump made a
listen,
speech. She made a
I
speech
didn't,
last
you know,
night. which was,
I was listening along with everyone. I didn't catch it in the listening. I remember vaguely Michelle Obama's speech, but when you hold those two things upside to side, it's very hard to
Pretty
deny
tough.
that there's. I mean, there's whole chunks of that speech that are incorporated into this one. I'm going to assume that Melania Trump didn't do it personally, but someone on that campaign ought to be paying a heavy price for it.
well, I don't think they're gonna. I mean, Trump says no one's going to be punished, and I think as an ethics. Plagiarism is not great. I mean, you can't do that. And they say these are words that people use. Not like that. I mean, not that
If I had
close.
if I had a student who handed in a paper that was that substantially similar to something else, I'd fail him.
There you go. There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Fail. Big F.
Jim Newton, thank you. We've been wanting to get you on for a couple of weeks. I will email you, and I want to come over and visit you someday, okay?
Look forward to it. Take care.
There he goes, Jim Newton. And I thought he was, if not the star of the show, he puts the perspective of a newspaper, and by the way, an award-winning newspaper guy, into that O.J. situation. And sounds like he was learning as he went along, too.
It's like I said, if you haven't seen the documentary, it's so interesting. And the guys that did this documentary, I thought they really did an amazing, amazing job of trying to figure out, just uncover stuff that we didn't know before. And they uncovered a lot of stuff I never knew. So I love it.
We didn't ask him if he thought O.J. was guilty or innocent because that's not his place.
It's not,
I keep asking Robert Shapiro, and he won't even tell me.
what, yeah, no.
I'll ask you.
Guilty.
Really?
100%. No doubt in my mind about it.
You're kidding.
No.
I actually, he was guilty in the next trial,
Well, yes.
and could be the dumbest person in America to go out and commit another crime, right?
Not a sharp guy.
But the whole thing is sad. And
I hope
ugly.
he can't hear this.
I remember when he hears everything. I remember when the Bronco chase was going on. Sean, my son, knew that I knew OJ.
Oh, boy.
And by the way, OJ was like, I don't mean this now, but at the time was like one of the great personalities in this country.
I mean, he was the...
He beat up his wife and threw her down the stairs, but, that's awful. But still, he was in all the commercials and everything.
Well, nobody knew that he had beaten his wife
not to that detail.
To that amount.
So
yeah.
I remember Sean was about 8. Hey, he was 8. It was 20 years ago. And we were having a big barbecue to watch Game 6 of the NBA Finals or whatever it was. And Sean finally came in and said, Dad, why don't you tell me about this OJ guy now? So I had to explain to him.
Oh, boy.
As I had to explain to him about Bill Clinton. I said to the president one day, I had to explain to my son. Anyway, Jim Newton, what a great guest. We'll have him back. Because
I like that
he's
guy,
good.
yeah.
We come back, the debut of what appears to be the history of Pat O'Brien, but it's a new opening to our show. We're going to cut it down, but Eric Olson did the thing. And Court's in, if you got to watch it, because Court's in there really briefly.
Yeah.
And we come back, we'll spew on some more. Everything all the time rolls on in a minute.